as you started to see with the different innovations that are touching on education technology, skill building, on meaningful connections, on the way that we support people through their well-being, there's a lot of different approaches that Headstream in our community is taking to understand how to build in digital well-being into the lives of young people as they're growing up. And we've been spending time thinking about this from a research approach as well. Our first research initiative was to build a causal loop systems map back in 2019. And we used that map as the foundation for the types of innovations that we sourced and the types of innovations that we were looking for. It was time to refresh that this year. And so I'd love to introduce you to Bridget, who's worked with our community around the Digital Delta Research Initiative. And we'll go into a little bit of depth to share some of the learnings in that process, as well as hone in on one specific area that we want to look into and the importance of building meaningful connections and meaningful relationships in digital spaces. So I'll pass it over to you to Bridget.
Thanks. So as David mentioned, I'm the project lead for Digital Delta, and Digital Delta is just amazing. It's my passion and I love it. But we have been working on making digital experiences more beautiful for young people. And so with this initiative, before we can even really jump into this core part of it, we have to take a little bit of a step back and understand why we wanted to do this work in the first place. And we had to kind of understand the overarching problem that we see. And so in the last decade, we've seen a rise in teen mental well-being challenges, and it's still rising. This is a big, interconnected, and complex issue, and it has many things that affect it. So when we first started this program, we asked a couple questions. We asked, well, first off, we wanted to understand what was going on. And then secondly, we asked, why are complex problems so hard to solve? And first, it's that they're too big to be understood, solved, or fixed by any one person. If you break them down, they're comprised of smaller root factors and there's so many of them, it's overwhelming. And then if that's not enough, there are these smaller root factors that are interdependent in complex ways. So to address the problem of this complexity and magnitude, we had to ask which of these root factors, if solved, could have the biggest positive impact. And a complex and messy problem like this needs a creative solution. And that's where Digital Delta came in. Given this is a crowdsourced research project, we consulted and vetted with our results with youth and professionals alike every single step of the way. So first we identified our North Star, and that was our guiding light and what we referred back to at each session or each section of this program. After that, we identified what our root factors were. We started with 180 and we got all the way down to about 77. We created this beautiful visualization, which I get to show you later. We did some analysis, and now we are working to share what we've done. I am so excited to share the actual data outcomes with you. We had close to 22,000 answers on how these root factors related to each other. And we had 462 young people provide insight, which really honors how committed we are to designing with and for youth. On top of that, the diversity of the data is really significant because we're building solutions for these communities. And so it's super vital to have their voices come through the data in a really strong way. So now I get to share the fun part. So this is our visualization, and this is the results of the analysis that we did. As you can see, first we got back this big ball of spaghetti. It's complicated and a little convoluted, but we done some additional tagging to help folks understand what you can do with this network. And you can hover over any one root factor to see how it connects and what its position is within the rest of the network. You can explore by concepts related to each of the root factors, some related to impact management, and some other categories as well. So through further analysis, we really found what we were looking for, and that is these catalysts. And I can't dive into the whole entire analysis here, but these 13 catalysts that we found that are here in yellow are really important because they have a high catalyst score, which you can see here. And then in their relative position, they are more upstream than downstream. And what that means is if you think about like an ecological system, like a river, anything that's upstream is going to have a lot of effect on any things that are downstream. And so because of that, we can go through a couple examples. So Over here, you'll see the level of self-esteem. While we all know this is something that's incredibly important, it doesn't actually have a really high influence over the entire network because of the amount of things that both affect self-esteem and the amount of things that self-esteem affects. But then if you look at something like access to mental health resources, this rose to be one of the top 13 for us because it affects a lot of things within the network, but has relatively few things that directly affect it. So these top 13 catalysts quickly sorted into 3 categories for us. But before I jump back into these categories, I'm so excited to announce that this is going to be a publicly available tool. And this is something that you all can use, explore, play with the data, and think about the implications of how you can apply it to your own work. So with that, as I mentioned, these 13 catalysts, they sorted into 3 categories, and that's balanced content, accessible resources, and positive relationships. And today I'm just going to be focusing on positive relationships. So within positive relationships, 3 root factors really, really matter, and that's exposure to positive parenting and role models. That means consistent, respectful, and supportive. The time spent with others online, and the time spent in social groups. So if we dig a little bit deeper into how each of these contribute to positive relationships, we can think about how relationships are at its core about connection and about meaningful connections and the quality of those relationships. So it matters who you spend time with, what you do during that time, and what you talk about. Having role models around us who are consistent, respectful, and supportive gives us the confidence, the resilience, and the support you need to flourish. So strong adult relationships, whether it's a coach, a teacher, a parent, an adult figure in your life, they go a long way towards affecting your behavior, your responses to things, and they help give you perspective and learn from your mistakes. When we think about spending time online with friends, you'll notice that it's with friends, not strangers, because friends are how you learn to be a social person. It's how you learn how to give and take in a relationship, how you learn how to take advice. They help you through complex social situations. They help you figure out context of things. And of course, they add confidence and joy and laughter. And so it really matters to be online with friends. And lastly, when you have supportive social groups, they support you mentally, physically. They help you find the resources that you need. The world becomes a little bit easier place to be. And it shapes the way that you experience life. So that's the way that you experiment and take risks and learn new things. So community is really what helps us understand who we are in relation to others and the world around us. Through each of these, you'll notice that it highlights the quality as well as the meaningful connections as the huge parts of these positive relationships. And they're really necessary in order to foster the other components of well-being and community. So with that, I'll pass over to David, who's going to talk a bit further about what community means for innovations in this space.
Thanks so much, Bridget. We're really excited to share this crowdsourced research. It'll be coming out at the beginning of next month. So keep an eye out on that when we'll figure out the ways that we can leverage this for your communities, for your organizations, for your innovations. What it's really brought to the forefront for us is doubling down on meaningful connections and thinking about how we can build these into the work that we do at Headstream. Obviously, we'll continue to support innovations like the ones that you've met today, that these types of communities and connections are at the forefront. But I think we need to expand that to start thinking about other ways. And so we're starting today with a thought partnership and kicking this off about ways we can look at this a little bit differently. How do we take some of the learnings of this community, some of the research, and take that upstream into some of these big tech platforms where a lot of young people are? What are components of those platforms that we can train the folks who are working in trust and safety, the product managers, to think about? I think for this session as well, we're also thinking about the ways that we can take products that are focused on health or on education and that don't necessarily have communities as a primary feature, and how do we build communities as a complementary feature to that work? We see an economic value in doing that. There's virality, there's longer term customer engagement when you have a community that people can coalesce around a product or a service, even if it isn't necessarily social first. We also see obviously the social impact, as this research with Digital Delta has shown us, as well as our earlier research around the causal loop systems map. And there's also an interesting dynamic that if you have a community and they're inputting into your product, you're going to have a product that reflects your community, reflects your users, a product that has the meaning and intention behind it to serve the needs of your users.